Chicago will undergo a major changing of the guard when we decide who our next mayor will be in just a few days. But that's not the only big change heading our way. The resignation of Police Superintendent David Brown on March 16th means Chicago's also getting a new top cop. We'll know what Chicagoans want in a new mayor soon enough. But what sorts of things are we looking for in a new police superintendent? I'm Andrea Zopp. This is Chicago Newsroom 2.0. Join me as we sort it all out. We'll be right back with our first guest.
For as long as America has existed, the inequitable treatment Black Americans experience due to the color or shade of their skin has persisted. On Thursday, March 30th at 7 p.m., CAN TV's special report, The Marginalized Working While Black, takes a deep dive into America's original sin, race and the value, or lack thereof, attached to it.
I opened this show talking about the major changing of the guard coming to Chicago City Hall and to our police department. Well, the changing of the guard doesn't stop on LaSalle Street because there are also very big changes happening at Chicago State by way of today's first guest. She's the school's new athletic director, a huge change all by itself, and she's looking to make a massive shift in the way the South Side of Chicago does collegiate sports. Without further ado, please help me welcome today's first guest, Dr. Monique Carroll. Welcome, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
So I want to start by telling a little bit about your story. How did you get into college athletic sports, and how did you become interested in becoming an athletic director?
So I was a collegiate athlete. I guess I'd probably start with being a middle child of 5 in a sports family. Everyone played at least 4 sports.
What?
I don't know how my parents did it, how they shuffled getting us all around.
That's a lot of driving.
A lot. You don't think about it till you start paying for gas yourself. Yeah. But grew up playing sports. I got an opportunity to play volleyball at Arkansas Pine Bluff, where one of my biggest mentors was my volleyball coach. I knew after watching her I wanted to coach. I wanted to be involved in sports. I had a semester where I was a student teacher and was a head coach at a Christian academy in Pine Bluff. I realized very quickly I was not a coach. I did not have the temperament. I did not have what it truly takes to be a coach, but I knew I still wanted to be involved in sports.
So tell me what you think that made the big difference when you're like, nope, can't do this.
So for me, I think it goes when they say you look at great athletes and why sometimes they don't always make good coaches because you don't have it's no excuses. Right. It's just, are we doing this? Are we going all out? And are we going to win? Right. And when you're used to that, it's hard to be in a position where that may not always be the case.
Right,
so.
Understood. So you decided to go on the other side of college athletics, which is administration, right?
Yes. So I started in compliance, where everybody wants to start any company, right? And worked my way up through compliance. Had a really good time, but I was looking for something new. I knew my degree was in sports management, my master's, my bachelor's was in physical education. So I knew it was something more than just doing the NCAA compliance. So that's when I started getting into external affairs and started really having a blast. Fundraising, facilities, marketing, ticket sales, to me, everything that made money. Had a few years where I was like, is this the right niche? 2016, when I was at Prairie View, we led all HBCUs in revenue generated. So that was like the rubber stamp to say, here we are.
Right.
And from there, I just continued to pursue upper administration until I got the call that Chicago State was looking for an athletic director.
And you were an assistant athletic director at the time.
I was an athletic director.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It was a small NAIA school in Austin, Texas, Houston-Tillotson. Mm-hmm.
All right. And so then you came and interviewed and got the job at Chicago State. And you've been there now how long?
It's been 6 months.
Wow.
Yes.
Time flies.
Yes, it
has.
has.
And tell us a little bit about what you hope to accomplish at Chicago State. What's your vision there?
So my vision is for people to look and say, what are they doing at Chicago State? How are they making that happen? How are they getting that done? And really from just laying a good foundation, laying groundwork, getting people that are excited to be here, recruiting student athletes that are excited to be here, and then being very competitive. That's something that we preach all the time, being out in the community, not just saying we're all about the community, but actually doing community service, inviting the community to campus, to games, and really solidifying solidifying the partnership. So those are just some of the things that are in my vision that are a reason why I took the job, because I see it's very possible to happen here at Chicago State.
And I think many people may not know, but Chicago State is a Division I athletic school. What are some of the sports that we have at Chicago State?
Yeah, so Division I, the highest level you can play in all the sports that we offer. So we have men and women's basketball, men and women's soccer, we have volleyball, we have all the track and fields, so that's indoor track, outdoor track, and cross country. We have men and women's golf and men and women's tennis. So 15 sports. So anything you could think you want to do, you can come do it at Chicago State.
Oh, that's exciting. You're looking into possibly a new sport at Chicago State. So recently you announced an advisory committee to look into the possibility of football at Chicago State. So tell us the genesis of that idea, and how's that committee going?
In today's climate of intercollegiate athletics, you always have to have a pulse on how you can expand, how you can continue to grow. And so right now we're looking into football. We're also looking into other women's sports to add with that as well, to see, is it really feasible to bring football, Division I football, to the south side of Chicago?
And you got a pretty amazing group of people to sit on this advisory committee. Tell us who that is, who are interested in supporting Chicago State and the work that you're doing there.
Yes, so our advisory board, they never cease to amaze me in the meetings with their accomplishments. They're a very modest group, but former NFL players, former Bears players on the committee, NBA referees, city leaders with community service businesses are on the committee. We just added some people in the finance industry to the committee. So it really is a group of movers and shakers in Chicago who are trying to see how they can assist us in making this happen.
So you got a lot of press for the announcement. Why do you think football would be something that would be great for Chicago State to have?
So in sports, the number one thing you tell any coach in any sport is protect your backyard. And Chicago, specifically the South Side, has talent. When we announced it, I got a call from a coach at Notre Dame, and he was like, we recruit a lot of students from there. There's a lot of talent. I had student athletes adding me on Twitter. I had to go to our compliance person and say, is this okay? So there is a lot of buzz. There's a lot of talent. And I think the community deserves it. It's something that we should use our best efforts to see if we can make happen.
As the athletic director, what do you think is the most important thing that you tell the student athletes when they come on campus and you want them to be thinking and focused on, besides just, obviously you have to work hard at your sport? What else do you tell them in terms of their role as student athletes?
Graduation. You have to come here, no matter how talented you are athletically, you have to come here wanting to graduate. If you want to graduate, no matter if you're a 2.5 student or 4.0, we will help you get there, but you have to have something in you that wants to get a college degree, at least one degree.
Absolutely. And so tell me what else, and as you're thinking about kind of the sports future for students, are there other things that you offer students who come to Chicago State to play sports? You want them to graduate, but what else do they get out of it? Why even have, I've had people say, why do you even have a sports program at Chicago State? Why does that matter?
The benefits of sports, I think people talk about them a lot, sometimes almost to the detriment, but really, we are nurturing and cultivating students who are going to be leaders, who have tenacity. They know how to lose. They know how to get back up. They know how to handle adversity. You're going to learn all those things through a Division I college experience. We have student athlete development staff that take them through financial literacy, resume writing. So this is in addition to everything that the university is doing. We take what they're doing and we make sure they get it. And so I think that experience, who wouldn't want that, especially at the Division I level right here in Chicago?
What about the students who aren't athletes? What do they get from a strong athletic program?
If you look at any school's enrollment, and the Final Four is going on now, applications will skyrocket at all of these institutions that are at the Final Four. Students want to have a team that they can be proud of, a team that they can cheer for, a team that they can stick it out with. It's not always sometimes all the wins you want, but students really love that part of the student experience. It gives them something to do. It gives them an outlet outside of the classroom and the academic space. Gives them that extracurricular activity that they can participate in and really grow their pride for the university.
So it elevates the university as a whole,
yes,
right?
Definitely.
The work that you're doing. Wow, it's exciting. Well, we're really thrilled that you could be here with us to talk a little bit about Chicago State and the athletic program. We look forward to having you come back and talk a little and tell us some more about your successes and what you've accomplished. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Carroll.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back after this.
For as long as America has existed, the inequitable treatment Black Americans experience due to the color or shade of their skin has persisted. On Thursday, March 30th at 7 p.m., CAN TV's special report, The Marginalized Working While Black, takes a deep dive into America's original sin, race and the value, or lack thereof, attached to it.
The resignation of Police Superintendent David Brown wasn't exactly a surprise. Every mayoral challenger vowed to fire Brown if elected. And towards the end, it wasn't clear if Mayor Lightfoot would keep him on, even if she won a second term. But when Mayor Lightfoot didn't make it the runoff, Brown's future seemed that much more inevitable. So now that he's officially out, what should Chicagoans look for in our next superintendent? And perhaps more important than that, what sort of characteristics have Chicago residents already said they'd like to see in the person chosen to replace Superintendent Brown? Well, here to talk about it are today's roundtable participants: Jamie Nesbitt Golden, a reporter for Block Club Chicago; Carlos Ballesteros, a reporter for Injustice Watch; and Lakeidra Chavis, reporter for the Marshall Project. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us, and let's begin. So let's start with crime has been the topic in the campaign, on and on. We have very different perspectives from the candidates. What are you hearing from the communities that you cover? Do people want more police officers in their communities? Carlos, I'll start with you.
I think people are expressing a desire to see more officers, but I think we should interrogate that desire and maybe see what change that could bring. I think we have a pretty recent historical example as to what happens when we have a push to hire a lot of new cops. Rahm Emanuel, former Mayor Rahm Emanuel in 2016, in response to heightening levels of violent crime and shootings, pledged to hire 1,000 new police officers, and he did. And it's going to cost the city about $1 billion by 2026. And yet we're now back to those 2016 numbers in terms of murders and shootings, in fact, exceeding them. And so I think while the public is definitely, cares a lot about improving public safety, I think we should have a more broader conversation as to whether or not the number of police officers we have correlates with safer streets.
Maybe it's not just about the numbers.
I think people want a more active presence from police, but a different kind of presence, right? So it's not just about having more police officers, it's having police officers who understand the community, who are from the community, and who really understand that when we talk about public safety in Chicago, when we talk about crime, we're talking about really complex issues that you can't just arrest your way out of. That was something that Superintendent David Brown said when he first took over the job, leading the Chicago Police Department. That sort of went away towards the end. But, I think for people living in Chicago, and especially living in areas of the city that experience more disinvestment, they want policing that is truly going to help them and not lead to more misconduct and other issues that we've seen.
We still have real issues with the relationships between the community and the police. Mm-hmm. And people still feel unsafe and would like to see more officers, but they're worried about what kind of relationship they'll have with those officers.
That is true. One thing that I've sort of discovered while listening in or following these aldermanic debates is that some of the residents on the South Side felt that, during the 2020 uprisings, they were left, hanging to dry. A lot of the officers that were sort of dispatched at their beat were sent downtown to protect businesses there, and they felt that they were sacrificed for those businesses. So you have a lot of distrust between residents and law enforcement. And, of course, candidates are saying, the best way to fix that is to return to community policing, have, cops live in the neighborhoods where they serve. But you also have difficulty getting police officers who actually live in those communities. I remember Rahm Emanuel did have a program during his tenure where he was trying to entice officers into buying homes in underserved areas, and that didn't go over well. So now you have to figure out new ways of trying to bridge that gap.
Do communities have some suggestions about how to better connect with the officers in their districts? Any thoughts, or are you hearing that either from people in the neighborhoods or activists that are engaged on this topic?
What I hear from people, especially mothers who have lost children to gun violence, is that they really want to have a better understanding of what the process is for solving a shooting, solving a murder. How can they get a hold of the detective that is working on their case? Why aren't they hearing back? So I think those are aspects of policing that could really be beneficial, explaining what residents can expect, especially when they experience something like that.
Right. Well, that sounds like to me that's all about kind of relationship,
Yeah.
right? So, and one of the things that one of the candidates has said, Brandon Johnson, Commissioner Johnson has said, is he wants to add 200 more detectives. So, what do you think about that, Jamie?
Having covered or spoken with families of victims, typically the 51 missing and murdered women issue that's been sort of taken. That's been a big deal, right? So talking to those families, they don't hear from detectives. They, reach out on a daily basis, and they're told that the detective is on vacation, or is just away from the desk, and they don't get answers for months and sometimes years. So figuring out a way to again sort of build that trust, and maybe 200 detectives could fix that, but there's also the training, right? There's also making sure that they're sort of culturally competent and know how to deal with families that are in distress and have that sort of empathy. I think those are important things to sort of emphasize too.
And to go off that point, I've been working on a few stories recently on immigrant crime victims and their relationship with police. And what I keep hearing as well is that there's not enough emphasis on language access when it comes to policing. Oftentimes, immigrant victims who don't speak English or Spanish have trouble communicating with the officers involved in their case, or even getting in contact with the detectives. And even if they do get in contact, then it's another hurdle to be able to understand what's going on. And so I think there needs to be an emphasis on that part as well.
Yeah, I think it's such a great point, that both of you made that actually I haven't heard either candidate really talk about, and it's really about building that relationship, because there's, it's a different skill set. Investigating a crime is very different from victim support, and maybe if they thought about creating an ombudsman office, right, where you could think about language issues, where you could think about, so the detective who's trying to carry a huge caseload maybe doesn't have to call back, but you have somebody who's a little more skilled in working. But I actually haven't heard that that idea. Maybe somebody I should write it in, send it in, submit it. But that really goes back to this another point though, which is what role does the superintendent have? How can the superintendent impact this issue of relationship with the community? How does that happen? What do you think, Carlos?
I think both candidates had said that they want to promote someone from within, which means this is going to be someone that's been in the force for a while, probably more than a decade. If you pair that with kind of the conversations around distrust, then it's unclear to me how someone from the inside can, turn that conversation around. I think there's been some talk about maybe getting some new blood into the department. That's what former Superintendent Charlie Beck told the Sun-Times this week, to kind of shake things up, bring in some fresh ideas. Either way, it's going to be incredibly difficult to bridge this gap, I think.
I think the police chief sets the tone, right? Sets the tone for so many things, not just, as you were saying, the relationship that the police department has with the community, but also what is acceptable within the police department. And former interim superintendent Charlie Beck, he came in, he was here for a little less than 6 months, but really was committed to community policing, did lots of restructuring in the department and tried to incorporate a different mindset. Of course, most of that was undone when David Brown took office, but it's incredibly important.
Is it really about whether it's somebody in the department or who's been in the department, or is it about what kind of leader you have? But there's been a lot of push about saying that we need to have somebody in the department, and certainly both candidates have said that that's their goal. However, we all know that both candidates don't get to just decide, pick a superintendent, right? So there's the community commission that's now running the process, and they've been very clear that they're doing a national search. So how are we going to, do you see a potential budding of objectives here?
Oh, of course. And I think, while I do understand the need to, want a familiar face at the top, I also understand the need to, again, sort of get a new leadership in place that, that has, new ideas, that, that is innovative, that can bring some nuance to some of these issues that we're dealing with. But honestly, it's going to be messy, and I think we have to be prepared for that. I think hopefully that the new person, the person that's chosen, will again have that empathy, and be able to communicate with all residents. I think the one of Brown's missteps during his tenure was that he didn't really reach out to folks in the South Side, and it was also very much law and order, right? We didn't hear much in a way of how can we, sort of address these, these sort of lower level crimes in a way that doesn't necessarily punish those who doing it. Can we figure out alternative methods to hold folks accountable for what they do, but not go full draconian on them, right? And I think hopefully the next person in charge will sort of keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think, how much do you think of an impact do you think that the pandemic had, both on Brown's kind of tenure, his success, on the crime rate? If you remember, he started, I think, in April of 2020.
Yeah.
And so, you're talking about getting out and getting, he would say, and I've heard him say, that it was hard to get out and get to people. He couldn't even get to his own officers on a regular basis.
Right.
And so, plus, there's some argument that the pandemic didn't help with the crime rate. So, do you think that the pandemic kind of was an overlay that kind of doomed his superintendency, or do you think he really didn't step into it particularly well?
I don't think he stepped into it well. And I'm looking at nonprofit organizations on the ground that were doing the work during the pandemic, right? I know that it was dangerous, but people had needs, and they still managed to meet those needs. And law enforcement shouldn't have been different there. I think, yes, it was difficult, and it might not have been easy to get to these folks, but there is definitely a way to do it if you really want to, and I think they dropped the ball there. Yep.
I wouldn't want the job during the pandemic. I think it makes total sense to me why after 3 years you would want to leave a job like that. So I can't blame him. And I don't know if I would personally be able to do a better job than him. What I can say, I think, is the pandemic and everything that came out of it, crime rates, spike in shootings, I think demonstrated that crime is much more than just about how many cops we have on the street, what's our police budget. I think it really showed that violence is a societal issue that needs more, that has to be addressed with more than just figuring out the number of cops in a certain area, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, I think we're still trapped in these kind of tropes, and I'm thinking about the two mayoral candidates we have, both kind of speaking about police as a way to reduce crime, when I think the conversation needs to be broadened. And unfortunately, I think until we do that, I think the next superintendent is kind of trapped in this cycle of having to figure out these extremely big issues with 12,000 police at his disposal.
So I wanted to bring up a point to sort of piggyback on what Carlos is saying. There are older people who are sort of looking at alternative methods to keep their constituents safe. One of those things, like for example, in Sophia King's ward, she started a pilot program with a local security firm and ex-cons for community and social change, this nonprofit group that sort of helps the formerly incarcerated sort of reintegrate into society. And with this program, they sort of, they have two teams, both unarmed, that sort of patrol the commercial corridors within Grand Boulevard. And according to them, it's been paying off. So you're looking at these alternative methods to sort of, okay, so if the cops can't do this, then maybe we can. And whenever they're able to assist, we can, take the help. But in the meantime, this is what we're going to do. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more of, communities sort of taking control of the issue themselves.
Right, and I think, ultimately, to a certain extent, I mean, it is, the community does need to step up. I mean, that's what, block clubs and community policing is all about. How important do you think it is, Lakeidra, to the community to participate in this superintendent selection process?
Well, I think it's important that people feel like their concerns, especially when it comes to policing, that they are being heard, and that is being reflected in the potential candidates and whoever ends up getting the job. So yeah, I think it's pretty crucial to whoever's going to lead the department next.
Yeah, I think now's a good time to remind people that the commission is having community hearings, and so there's a real opportunity to come out. And I want to take, we have just a few more minutes, but I do, Carlos, you and I were talking about an issue earlier because I want to just give an example of why it becomes so important. Can you just take just a minute to talk quickly about the visa problem that we were talking about and why making sure that we have police who connect with the community matters so much?
Yeah, of course. So there's this thing called a U visa. A U visa is a form of legal status for someone who's undocumented that was a victim of a qualifying crime and cooperated with police. This visa was created 20 years ago to get people to come out and cooperate with law enforcement even though they're undocumented and might be afraid to reach out to the police. But what I found in a recent investigation was that the Chicago Police Department has denied hundreds of undocumented crime victims the chance to apply for this visa, basically saying they weren't victims of qualifying crimes or that they didn't cooperate. And in several instances that I was able to report out, those they definitely met that criteria. And it's really tricky because when it comes to immigrant communities, there is a distrust of government, and so when you hear about police denying people the chance to get legal status through this avenue that was created for that purpose, it really sends shockwaves across neighborhoods.
Kind of undercuts the whole point, right?
Exactly.
And your investigation showed that Chicago's rate of denying these visas was significantly higher than New York and Los Angeles, and that was really the challenge. And
yeah,
so,
like we were having a 50% denial rate from what the numbers I saw compared to like 20% in New York and Los Angeles. The Inspector General's office had an investigation on this issue a few years ago, and they found that the CAPS, the Community Alternative Policing System here in Chicago, had no materials whatsoever produced on the U visa. So there was no community engagement on what it was, that it existed. And so people are finding out about this program after the fact.
Accident. So completely undercutting the whole point and undercutting community relations with the police. So really, thank you. Your insights have been so helpful and really productive, and I hope you'll come back and help us some more as we go through this process. I really appreciate you taking the time and for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tune in Thursday, March 30th at 7 o'clock p.m. for the premiere of the CAN TV docuseries, The Marginalized, Working While Black.
Then join Melissa and me and this incredible group of panelists for an honest, fearless conversation about race in America.
A difficult conversation indeed, but one well worth having together.
A changing of the guard is inevitable, whether it's a wonderful change you eagerly anticipate, like the possibility of collegiate football on the city's south side, or the sort of change where the outcome is less certain, like a new direction for Chicago law enforcement. Either way, change is bound to happen. Our job is to be willing to roll with the changes as they come and adapt accordingly. The best way to do that is to remain knowledgeable and informed, and to keep asking the tough questions. Thank you, Chicago. See you next time.